a few years ago, decided to display them rather than just kind of keep them in a shoebox because they give me energy. They remind me what I'm capable of. And I've had mornings when I'm down here working out and I just feel lethargic and I feel like I've got a big race coming up and I start to doubt whether I'm going to be ready. And then I look up and I've got all these medals and I'm like, wait a minute, I did that race and I did that race. And like, I got this. Like, it's just like instant reminder of what I'm capable of.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Eternal Optimist podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drinkon. And today we have someone who I'm already just getting to know, Mr. Shawn Hoyt today. And it's been amazing so far because he's a little bit older than me, it would appear, but he's fitter than me. He's got a message around fitness. And I know he's overcome a lot of stuff. So I think we're going to have a really deeply engaging, like really cool human conversation today. So let's sit back and relax. But if you're driving, keep your eyes on the road, team, and let's have a good time. Shawn, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Matt. Doing really, really well. I'm very excited to be here and love your focus on eternal optimism.
Yeah, I mean, we were chatting earlier about it, and you feel you've had some of this kind of in your DNA growing up. But can you talk about what does it mean to be an eternal optimist? Why does that appeal to you?
Well, I think just throughout my life, whatever challenges, I went through, whether family issues early on or other challenges along the way, I think I always just had an innate sense that even amongst the challenge, there was always a lot of good. And I just think somehow the combination of nature and nurture, I give my mother and my grandfather a ton of credit on this. I just was always able to see that there was a silver lining and that there was always things to be really grateful for. And even when things were bad, they certainly could be much, much worse. And then as you travel, as you get older and you go to places around the world and you see firsthand, sadly, that things could be a lot worse. And it's always reinforced my worldview that I am incredibly blessed. There are many people that have many, many more blessings than me, but, I'm quite blessed in the scheme of things. And I never kind of lose track of that, for all that I don't have, there's so much that I do.
I love the way you say this. I feel the exact same way. There's when stuff happens, many people go negative, and I will see that there might be some challenge in it, and at the same time, I guess this may be a great opportunity here. And let's play it out and see what happens. Because I'd say that some of my greatest strengths are born out of some of the more challenging things I've been through in my life. So I love the way you frame it. I think we're cut from a very similar cloth in that way. Before we go any further, Shawn, I'd love to ask, just to give the audience some context, who is Shawn Hoyt? I mean, where are you from, background? Just give us a few bullet points for some context, Shawn.
So I'll tell you where I am today, and then I'll go back and tell how I got here. So today I live in the Boston area. I live just north of the city in a town called Medford. And I've been in the Boston area now for well over 30 years. I love New England. I'm a huge fan. I got remarried in 2022 to a wonderfully talented and fun artist who's also an art educator. We have a blended family, so I have 4 kids from a previous marriage. She has 2 from a previous marriage. So we have 6 kids between 17 and 25. So many very talented and unique young adults that we're raising. As my day job, I'm a lawyer. I don't go into court. I don't sue people. I'm a lawyer in technology. And I've been working for many years now in a few different software companies. And I work on the commercial side, which means I basically help try to grow the business, bring in deals, negotiate contracts, help work through disputes with customers, and just, help the business grow and reach its revenue targets. I've been doing that for a long time. I'm blessed now to work for a company that was founded in Portugal, but over time has grown its business. So we have customers in over 80 countries. And so I love the scale of my job. I have teams and coworkers and customers and partners, all parts of the world. Makes it very interesting. That's what I do for work. Yeah. For my hobbies, which we'll get into later, I hope in detail, I've really am passionate about my fitness. I do triathlons, I do Spartan racing, I do running. And that story really goes all the way back to when I was a kid. So I grew up in Kansas City. And when I hit about 8th grade, I started running with my stepfather. He was training for a local 5K, I think, and wanted me to just come out and do it with him. And I had never done any kind of athletics other than like sitting the bench on my soccer team. And
Okay.
I decided, okay, I just wanted to hang around with him. It was really just wanting time with him. And so I started running around the neighborhood with him. And turns out like I was able to keep up with him. And I ran my first 5K in 8th grade and did pretty well. And it kind of lit a fire under me. I ended up deciding I was going to really apply myself to that, and ended up even breaking the school record in the mile
I
run later that year, totally unexpectedly. I didn't expect it. Nobody else expected it. But I kind of felt like I was really onto something. And then I ended up running my first marathon when I was 14 years old. I was so young, I had to get a doctor's note to even be allowed into the race.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that was the, I was got a very early start and kind of jumped into things early. And then when I went off to college, I went to Notre Dame. I kept doing marathons there. I did a couple in my college years. Then from there, I went up to law school. That's how I came to Boston. I went to Harvard Law School. And between law school and then getting married, having kids, my fitness really fell off. I was either not active or I was just your
Okay.
average 5K, 10K, just do kind of weekend warrior type runner. And that was fine. I was focusing on other things. I was traveling a lot for my job. I was, had 4 kids, by the time they were all
Yeah.
born. Life was complicated, life was busy. And then in my early 40s, I went through a divorce. And that was the first
Oh,
time in my life that I really hit a wall. And a very, very difficult time for me. It took me kind of several years until life felt normal again. But one of the silver linings of that was that I had a lot of time alone suddenly that I wasn't used to. And I needed
yeah.
some work through everything that I was dealing with and all the fear, uncertainty, doubt, confusion, shame, regret, everything that I was feeling. And,
Yes.
and fitness ended up being an outlet. And I ended up kind of getting back into running. I started doing triathlons for the first time. And at first I was just looking for an outlet, some way to channel what I was doing. And then I realized that, wait a minute, like I'm actually doing fairly well for being in my mid 40s. I actually hit a few PRs. I ran races in my 40s where I was faster than my 20s. And that really got me to thinking that,
Wow.
okay, like, maybe I don't need to accept that that we all just decline as we get older. And then once we get out of our 30s, our glory days are behind us, and we just settle into a period of a slow, comfortable decline and accept, gaining weight, getting out of shape, everything starting to hurt, being limited in our activities. And that was, kind of one of the turning points for me was going through that process and finding a new beginning out of a painful
Yeah.
ending.
Well, I'm curious about this because a couple things come up for me. I mean, I'm hearing you share the story. You're a successful career. You've got 4 kids. You're married, and then you're divorced. And that was a painful, challenging time. I don't know what that's like to be divorced or what it feels like to go through that type of separation in the middle of it. I can only relate that the pain I feel right now is caring for an aging, ailing parent. But it's a different kind of pain. So I'm curious, how do you do that? How do you go through and maintain a successful practice at your work and stay dad and navigate the complexity of being divorced or going through a divorce? How did you stay up for work, for your kids? I mean, can you talk about that period and how you made it through that?
Yeah. So, the reality is it's really hard, if not impossible, to go through a time like that in one area of your
Yeah,
life and still be at peak levels in other areas of your life. I mean, we are at the end of the day one whole person, and the things that are happening to us in one area impact us in others. It's hard to be like really crushing it at work and doing everything there, and yet be the most involved
yeah,
parent you can be, or vice versa. It's all about trying to balance it all. And when you're low in one area, it certainly can affect you in others. So the the divorce was certainly difficult for me on a personal level. It affected
yeah,
my health and kind of my mood and energy levels, and it definitely affected me
yeah.
at work. all of a sudden my life was both simpler because I wasn't at home with my kids all the time, but it was also more complicated. There were a lot of complicated logistics now with custody and kids going back and
Okay.
forth and going through
Yeah.
the legal process around a divorce and trying to figure out, like, keeping two sets of finances until that was all figured out and agreed. It just, it ends up affecting work. It ends up affecting everything in life. And the key for me was really just trying to start to think about, okay, every decision that I make now from here on out, how do I make those decisions in a way where I feel like I'm being my most honest, true, authentic self? Because you
Yeah.
don't reach a divorce unless unless you've taken your eye off the ball, you've made some mistakes, you've made some bad decisions, and
Okay.
so I came into the divorce with a lot of regret, things I could have done better, ways I could have been, a better partner, better father. And then
Okay.
when that's all behind you, at least, okay, I can't change that. Like, I wish I could.
Okay.
Wish I could go back. What do I do with that regret? Do I just
Yeah.
beat myself up over it, or do I try to channel it and say, okay, I'm going to learn something from this, and I'm going to use this to be a better person and make better decisions? And I really, when I was like, let's say I've told this as an example. Let's say I would go to one of my kids' soccer games. I would go there and it would be awkward because there was all these other families who knew us as a married couple. Maybe they heard rumors, or, they took a side, or they were better friends with my ex, or, what the
Yeah.
case may be. So I would get to these games and feel really self-conscious and uncertain.
Yeah.
And, at first I would just kind of want to shrink into a little shell. And then I started to realize, like, okay, I can't, I don't know what they're thinking, really. I can speculate, but it's just wild speculation. I can't change what they're thinking. All I can do is just be the best Shawn Hoyt that I can be and radiate calm, radiate positivity, never say a bad word about anybody else, never throw any dirt or fire on the situation, and just comport myself with poise and positivity. And I would just try to channel that in all these interactions and hope that in time, when people interacted with me and saw that poise and saw that positivity, that they would feel like, okay, like, I don't know what happened, but clearly he's trying to get his life back together, and I respect him for that. And I really worked hard to put myself in that mindset as I went about rebuilding my life.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're sharing this. Thank you. I'm curious, in that process, was it an overnight thing where you kind of put it back together, or did it take you some repetition? Did it take you a day, a week, a month, a year, a few years? I mean, in the process of kind of reshuffling and putting it back together, can you talk about, were there moments where you were especially lower, or was there a moment you realized that, it's going to be okay? I'd love to just go a little bit more zoomed in on you in that time, because I know a lot of people are struggling right now with similar things of how they comport themselves when they're in that time. And I think you're giving us a front row seat to exactly how you've done that. So can you zoom in just a little bit more if you can? Because this is gold.
I it really did feel like it was, a muscle that you're working to get stronger. And over
Okay.
time, it felt like it got easier. I got more confident in doing it. I started to feel less paranoid or less worried about what other people thought. It wasn't linear. It wasn't like every
Okay.
single day was easier, but on the whole, over time, you develop strength and you develop, a sense of confidence in yourself. And it's harder at first and it's easier later. And I'm sure most people who've been through a divorce will think back to the fact that 2 years, 3 years after the divorce, they couldn't have imagined as they went through the divorce that it was going to get that better in that time period. Like,
Yeah.
when you're deep in those first weeks and months,
Yeah.
it really seems overwhelming and it seems like things will never get better or that it will take forever. But most people that I've talked to, when they look back with the benefit of 2 to 3 years of hindsight, they
Okay.
feel that they got through it and they're in a better place, and they learned the lessons they needed to learn, and they're a better person. I'm not saying that they feel like you know, the divorce was a good thing or that they're happy for it. Some people are, some people aren't, but they feel like they're a better person. they know themselves better, they're in a better place, and they're able to be better for others in future relationships.
Thank you. I love the way you frame that. It felt like a muscle to get stronger, and that's one of the missions of our show is to provide hope that if you can do it, we can do it too. And Shawn has just graciously offered us, some insight into how that worked for him. And so, if anyone out there listening has gone through anything challenging, specifically divorce or loss of child, we've had all kinds of people on the show. So, if you've gone through some stuff, thank you to Shawn for sharing that you can get through it, and it may be harder from time to time, but 3 years removed, you're mostly through it, or it feels like you've made some great progress. So commendable. You kind of led into that one. That's a hard one.
Well, get this, Matt. So right as I'm coming out of the 2 to 3 years of, really starting to feel like I'm getting back on my feet and feeling kind of more confident again, then I had to go through another setback, which was I lost my job, and I'd been at a company for 11 years. And I didn't see it coming. It was kind of came out of the blue for me. We had hired a new manager of my department, and she had been really trying to reorganize things and change things around. And my role had been shifting as a result of that. And I think it got to the point where there was one further reorganization to go in which my role was gone. And I did not see that coming. I thought I was going to be at that company for, many, many more years. And I had tremendous group of friends and colleagues. And I was very proud of the work that I did. I managed a fairly big team there of people that I care deeply about. And we did a lot of great things. So I had to kind of summon up those same muscles in a different way this time. But really just a few years after I was getting back on my feet. And, that was kind of probably the second biggest challenge for me. Was I had never been through that before. School, work, I'd always been like move from one thing to the next thing in a kind of linear upward fashion. And this was my first real experience of getting knocked off your perch. And plus just coming off of a divorce, finances were still, I hadn't rebuilt my finances yet. It was still a very scary time financially. And I had to really summon that optimistic mentality to say, okay, what good am I going to make of this? And, and I decided that I was going to look at this as an opportunity to try to do something different. Not radically. I'm still going to be a lawyer. I'm still going to leverage my strengths. But instead of working at a big company like I had been, that, was at fairly advanced stage, I was going to try to go into a much earlier stage company and kind of get more startup type experience and build out my repertoire of skills and experiences, work with a different type of company in a different industry. And so I just said, okay, like, how do I go about doing this? Because I've been at that company 11 years. Usually when you're at a company for a long time, you tend to neglect your networking. And I certainly had. So I had to then say, okay, I got to rebuild my network from the ground up. And I really threw myself into it. I made a game plan, and I got a coach, and I figured out, okay, what are the industries I'm most passionate about? Who are the companies that I think are really exciting? Which people do I know who are, really connected in those industries and could point me in the right direction? Or if there's people that I want to meet and I don't know them yet, how can I get connected to them? And I just started talking to a ton of people. 2-3 times a day, I'd be meeting someone for coffee or lunch or calling them up on the phone. And, person A would move you to person B and then person C and D. And it was exhausting, but it was fascinating. I just met so many people. And I got, at first, like with the divorce, I was self-conscious. I was nervous. I doubted whether I had the experience to be credible in a smaller company setting. And, had I been at that one company for so long that I could no longer relate to a new company. But the more people I talked to, the more the confidence grew, the more the self doubt went away. And I started to really believe that I had a lot to offer. And I think that came through, that energy, that positive energy, self-belief came through in those conversations. And within 6 months of getting laid off, I was starting a new role at a very exciting growing tech
Nice.
company. And not only was it a new type of company, but for the first time in my life, I was not only doing legal work, but I was doing sales work. And that was exciting for me. I was pushing myself out my comfort zone and helping with sales operations. I wasn't actually calling on customers, but I was doing all what they call sales ops, all the
Yeah.
forecasting, quotas and territories, and you know budgeting and things like that. And so I was great. I was all of a sudden had this whole new chapter that never would have been possible if I hadn't been laid off. So that was a challenge
Yeah.
where it was extremely scary for a little while, but with an optimistic mentality, I was able to turn it around and ended up on a trajectory that led me to where I am today. And I'm very happy with where it ended up.
I love where you are now, and it gives me the confidence to ask this question. If you could take us back to this time, you were there for 11 years, and there was a conversation from the leader and you where you were laid off. Can you walk us forward? I don't need to name the people of the company. I'm just curious, when you had that conversation, what was going through your mind at that moment, for the next day, week? I mean, 6 months later, we solved it, and you're in the place that you're happy with. But what was going on in your mind in that moment, moving forward for the next day or week?
I mean, the most immediate reaction that I had was being concerned for my children because I was the primary source of income. And
Okay.
one of my children had been recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And we were still very early in that journey of care. Uh, the care for type 1 diabetics has come so far since then. But back then, it was still pretty invasive and took a lot of time and a lot of involvement, both for my son and his mom and myself. And I was worried about health insurance and his care, and
Yeah.
those are the things that all flashed immediately in front of my mind. Thankfully, the company where I was, and I have tremendous respect for the company still, was very generous about my healthcare. They knew the situation with my son, and they were very generous about extending the healthcare benefits until I could find a new job. So that ended up being
Wow.
okay. And once I knew that my kids were going to be okay from that perspective, then I just had to make sure, okay, like how do I go out and start making sure that I'm not going to be without an income for a long time because I have obligations to them and want to support them. And I quickly realized that okay, like I don't have to think about this as I had a full-time job, I've got to find another full-time job. Like those are the only two choices. As you dig into it and you think, okay, what's my goal? My goal is to be able to have work in my field and generate income that I can use to support my family. Then it opens up a world of possibilities because I could do consulting work, I could do project based work, I could do a number of things, in lieu of or until I could find a full time job. And so I started really broadening my discussions to offer myself, my services to people who wanted to just bring me in to consult on a project or cover a maternity leave, and I ended up making some income, doing consulting to help bridge that gap until I had the full time job. And it really taught me that there's so many. If you really have a goal and you're really open your mind to different ways to getting to the goal, versus thinking there's
Okay.
only one track and that's the track I've been on, and instead there's probably 4 or 5 tracks. And over time, I've met so many
Okay.
people who have built very successful careers doing 2 or 3 tracks at once. Sometimes it's not even one track. And you kind of go at it from
Huh.
multiple angles at the same time. And that can be really powerful. You just have to kind of have a flexible mindset and open your mind to different ways of getting from point A to point B.
I love that. The note that I made is just be aware and mindful and open to the many ways you can reach the goal. There's not just one way. There could be many ways. And so I appreciate your sharing this. You share the networking part. So thank you for sharing the first 2 challenges. I feel compelled to ask you about all the stuff I see. Those of you out there listening, you got to check this out on YouTube. Shawn's background is full of hardware, and you got to see the hardware I'm talking about. It just jumps out at you, and it's amazing. And you talk about your re-emergence into the fitness. You said that maybe your fitness fell off, your early 40s, you had the divorce, and it took you some time before you felt normal again, but fitness was an outlet. Can you take us forward from there and explain, just share your passion there?
Yeah. So the hardware behind me is all of my medals from Spartan racing, from triathlon, from running. And I really a few years ago decided to display them rather than just kind of keep them in a shoebox because they give me energy. They remind me what I'm capable of. And I've had mornings when I'm down here working out and I just feel lethargic and I feel like I've got a big race coming up and I start to doubt whether I'm going to be ready. And then I look up and I've got all these medals and I'm like, wait a minute, I did that race and I did that race. And like, I got this. Like, it's just like instant reminder of what I'm capable of. So to answer your question in particular, so I mentioned that after the divorce, I started getting more kind of back into fitness and really was running for a while. But then one of my great friends introduced me to triathlon and I started doing tries with him. We were doing sprint and Olympic distance tries for a while. And then I think it was 2014. So then like 3 years after the divorce, I said, I'm going to try a half Ironman. Like I'm going to really push myself to do something hard. And that race, for people that don't know, is just a little under a mile of swimming, 56 miles of biking, and then you run 13 miles. So I did that race. It took me about 6 hours. And at the end of it, I was very proud, but I said, no way in hell do I want to do a full Ironman because that would be double everything what I just told you. And so I was like, I did the half, no interest in doing the full, zero. And
well, how was it for you? Did you just breeze through it, or was it like one of the most difficult things you've done physically ever? I mean, what was your experience doing the half?
The swim was easier than I thought it was going to be. The bike was fine. Like I think I did
Okay.
all right, middle of the pack. But the run was a lot harder than I thought. And that surprised me because I'm a runner. Running 13 miles when you've just biked 56 is a very different animal than just running a half marathon when you're starting on fresh legs. So, 6 hours of fitness has a tendency to take its toll on you over the course of the race. So, I figured if 6 almost killed me, like I don't have any desire to do anything more than that. And around that time, I had also given up. I had also kind of felt like my marathon days were over too. I felt like 26 miles would just, my knees were getting achier and it would just be too much on my body and, content myself to do the shorter races. And then I started doing the Spartan races in my, I think 49 was when I did my first Spartan race. I really wanted to go into my 50s doing something new. And so right before I got there, I signed up for my first Spartan. I did the Spartan Sprint 2018.
Yes.
And just loved it. And so I knew I was excited going into my 50s. I'm like, I want to do more of these races. I want to do some Tough Mudders. And I've ended up doing, I've done 24 obstacle course races, I think. But the real thing that surprised me about my 50s was that I decided that my excuses about the marathon and my excuses about the Ironman were just excuses. They weren't legitimate obstacles. Like I wasn't physically incapable of running the marathon anymore. I wasn't physically incapable of completing an Ironman. I just had mentally told myself it was impossible. And I had to shift my thinking from saying it's impossible to acknowledging that, okay, it's at least possible. Like that's the beginning point when you unlock the potential is when you at least admit, okay, this is possible. It may be really hard and there may be a lot of challenges and obstacles, but I could do this if I decided to commit to it.
Okay.
Like, hitting that point was crucial. And I give a huge shout out to this group of runners that I train with called the Belmont Track Club. These people are incredibly inspiring. One of my friends has run 150 marathons, I think. Another one of my friends just ran a 200-mile trail race at like 36,000 feet of elevation total over the race. And so they do these things that they change your perspective as to what's normal and what's possible. And training with them, I started to see, okay, like if my friend can do 200 miles, I can run a marathon again. Like that's only 26. So when I started my 55th year, which was at the beginning of 2024, I decided I was going to go for it. I was going to sign up for the Boston Marathon again, and I hadn't done that in 23 years. So after a 23-year hiatus, I was going to run the marathon again, and I was going to do my first Ironman. So if I could do those at 55, then my excuses, I would know that there were no more excuses. Like it was time to really see what I was capable of. So those were the two big goals I set for myself at the start of 2024. Now, I'm happy to say I completed both of those goals. There were a couple bumps
Nice.
along the way, but I did the marathon and I did the
What
Ironman.
kind of bumps? What do you mean? What kind of bumps are we talking about here? You fell off the bike and you got injured in the race, or what? What do you mean?
So when I was training for the marathon, the Boston
Yeah.
Marathon is in April. So actually the next one's coming up like in a week or so. But this was last year. And I was probably about the start of March. Yeah, the very beginning of March. I was really cruising in my training. I was right on schedule. I had just done a 20 miler. I felt good. And I was really confident about my ability to do the race. Also, I was running for charity and I'd raised, over 10, by that point, I'd raised over $10,000 for this charity. And I was feeling really good about that and proud of all the money I had raised. And then on one week, with about 6 weeks to go, I started to feel pain in my hamstring tendon, the tendon that connects the hamstring to the glute. And at first it was
Okay.
just sore. And then the next run, it was like starting to get a little painful. And then by the third run, it was so painful I just had to stop. And I knew something was wrong. It was so painful that it wasn't just like go home and ice it and, come back the next day. So I went and got an MRI and they confirmed that I'd partially torn that tendon and that if I continued to run on it, I was going to fully tear it, which is what I was doing, which is what was starting to happen as I continued to run through the pain. So I had a couple choices. Number one is like just ignore them and just keep being stubborn and risking fully tearing the tendon. Another was postpone the marathon. And then they presented me with this little sliver of hope for a third option, which was that if I took 4 to 6 weeks of total rest and over that time did a few things like dry needling and massage and a few things to really heal that tendon and let it start to heal, I might be able to run
Okay.
the race. But I wasn't going to be able to train between then and the race. So I'd be running the marathon after about 5 to 6 weeks off. And there was no guarantee I might get
Ooh.
to mile 4 and have it tear. That was an option. And so I decided in consultation with my doctor and my physical therapist that I was at least going to give it a chance. I was going to throw myself completely into recovery.
Yep.
Almost every day I was at PT, I was at massage, I was at acupuncture. I was doing, everything that I had been told to do to heal it. And I wasn't running at all. And it was hard because all my teammates in training, they were out doing their last long runs. They were posting all of their tapers and I was doing nothing. And for 5 weeks, basically. And so it came to race day and I was just literally had no idea. Like I was going to go out there, I was going to start out slow and I was just going to take it a mile at a time. And I was just going to listen to my body. I wasn't going to try to be a hero. If at mile 3, my body was saying, you're about to tear this thing, I was going to stop and I was going to catch a ride. But I would take it a mile
Yep.
at a time and see what my body would give me. And I just feel so incredibly grateful that I took that approach because
Okay.
every mile where I didn't have to stop, where I didn't have the pain, every mile was like this wonderful gift. And it was a beautiful day. The crowds were out. I mean, people were one of the biggest crowds, I think, in years because of the weather. And people were cheering. And I just enjoyed that experience so much because every mile was something I didn't think I was going to have.
Yeah.
And every mile was, that when I got from 12 to 13 to 14, I was just like, every mile was a gift because I thought every mile was going to be the one where I was going to have to drop out. And sure enough, I finished the race. I got to the end and I ran the marathon and I crossed the finish line. And I just had this look of pure joy on my face because by giving myself at least the opportunity to do it and doing all the things that I needed to make that opportunity possible, it happened. And if I had been closed to the opportunity or had been unafraid to at least try, I never would have had that experience.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then, so it was just,
Okay.
it turned out my time was slow as hell compared to my normal and nothing compared to my target. But I ended up being totally fine with that because I just reframed the race. It wasn't about my time anymore. It was about showing myself what was possible, about healing, about gratitude. and about all this money that I ended up raising over 15,000 for the charity by the time it was all done. And I just felt, really blessed that I was able to raise all that money and do the race. Because if I'd raised all the money and not raced, I wouldn't have quite felt right about it.
I just love your ideas. Simple and very effective to take it a mile at a time. And your mindset was just to show yourself what you're capable of. So I love it. I love it. I wonder when it comes to racing and fitness, where is where's the draw for you nowadays? Like, why is this still the thing that really is your outlet, is your passion? I'll start with that.
Well, the really thing that I didn't expect that's really been wonderful is that I was doing this for a while for myself. I was rebuilding
Okay.
my life. I was rebuilding my confidence. I was rebuilding my health. I was, trying new challenges, to see, what I was capable of. But what I started to realize over time is that people were watching and thought it was amazing what I was doing, especially when I, did the marathon through the injury, did my first Ironman. I had people coming, just out of the woodwork telling me that I see what you're doing and now I've signed up for this and now I'm doing this on my own and I decided to do my first Spartan race and I realized that I was impacting people. And then all of a sudden my why for doing all of it became so much more powerful because if it was just for me, I might run 2 or 3
Yeah.
Ironmans and be like, you know what, I'm done with that. Like, it's boring now, or I don't need to do that challenge anymore. But if the goal isn't to run my third Ironman or whatever, if the goal is to inspire people, then I need to keep going. And maybe I don't do an Ironman again. Maybe I do something else, but I need to do something inspiring. I need to do something that lets more and more people know that there's still a lot of productive years ahead for them to do things that they had given up on or that they never tried in the first place. Like maybe they always
Yeah.
wanted to run a marathon, but figured they were too old to do it. Things like that. There's
Yeah.
a guy. There's a guy that I had become friends with who has never done a triathlon before at all, and now he's decided to do an Ironman. He's going to go from nothing to an Ironman. And I just think it's incredibly inspiring. And, I'm not going to take full credit for that, but if I've influenced him even in the smallest way to believe that it's possible, then that's awesome. Like, and that gives me a lot of fuel.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I'm trying to
Yeah.
do now is
Well,
just really meet as many people as I can, inspire as many people as I can. One of the things is before we started recording, we were talking about Instagram and how like you can, eat up lots of time just on social media. But I've gotten to the point where I intentionally invest time in social media because I'm
yeah.
not just scrolling. I'm interacting. I'm having conversations with people. I'm recognizing some great accomplishment that they did. If they post and they seem a little discouraged, I'm trying to give them, a little bit of a pep talk or some positive energy or, and then also figure out where we have in common. Like, oh, I see you're going to be doing this race in 3 weeks. I'm going to be there too. Let's meet up. Let's connect.
Yeah.
And I've met a ton of people in real life now that just started with an Instagram follow. And if you actually engage instead of just like scrolling and liking, and you start commenting and engaging with each other's content, it opens up the possibility to these real relationships. Where now I have real life friends, many of them in different cities. So if I go to a new city for a race or something, I will look up 3 or 4 people that I've gotten to know online and be like, hey, I'm going to be in this city. Like, any chance you want to meet up and go for a run, or you want to go and get dinner? And that's for example, how I met Amy Chambers, who's one of our mutual friends. That's exactly how we met.
Yeah.
That whole story. And now we've met twice in person, and we're getting together again a third time when she's up here in the Boston area soon. And it's just wonderful to see how, social media can really be a platform for true connection if you invest the time in it.
I love the way you reframe social media. It can be, a great way for true connection. So I love that. And before we go, I want to ask about your website and all that stuff in a moment. But before we get to that, you mentioned, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, you got remarried. And I'm curious about this origin story of this new, Mrs. Wonderful in your life. How did you meet your new wife?
So I had been single for over 10 years and,
Okay.
my now wife as well. And we had just, uh, never kind of met the right person or never been in the right place at the right time, to make a
Yeah.
relationship lasting after that. So it just ended up that by, you know, end of 2018, I think it was, we were both, still looking to find the right person. And we both went on an app called Bumble. And
Okay.
I think I'm not sure if Bumble's still around. I haven't been on a dating app in a while, thankfully. But the key to Bumble was is that once you had a match, the man couldn't do anything. The man could not contact the woman. The woman had to do the first outreach. So it kind of put the woman in control of the
Ooh.
communications.
Okay.
And so we matched up, and then after a couple of days, she reached out, and it was really. I mean, I knew quickly just based on her, who she was and her energy and her values that, it was going to be a really really good fit. And unfortunately, then we got engaged March. I think it was March 8th of 2020, and like the next week, everything shut down for COVID.
Ah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and we were living in
Yeah.
different houses, and so we were quarantined from each other as a newly engaged couple. So that was
My
an interesting
gosh.
challenge. But and then we had a wedding date that we had to postpone because of COVID and also because of some health issues in the family. So it wasn't finally until June of 2022 that we were able to get married. And you know, I tell her all the time, like, think it would have been, in one on many levels really nice to have met earlier in life and had more of life together. But I'm really happy we didn't because, I didn't know everything, in my 30s and 40s that I know now. And I didn't know myself as well as I do now. And I wouldn't have been as good of a partner to her. I wasn't as good of a partner to other people in my life before then. And I think that with life and with learning, failures, you can at least learn from them. And that helps with the regret. At least something good came out of it. And I think it benefited me in my 50s to be a better version of myself. And I think mentally, I'm the best version of myself now. I think as a partner in a relationship, I'm the best version of myself now. And I'm also hands down in the best physical shape of my life in my 50s. So, you know, people who tell you that it's too old when you're, in your 40s and your 50s and 60s, I just don't believe it. Um, you know, I,
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
think with the right mindset and the right discipline, uh, and making bold choices and holding yourself accountable to them, we can all do really, really great things and be in really, really good health.
You like to inspire people. And I want to say I've been inspired in our conversation. I'm 7 years behind you. I turned 48 this weekend in April of 2025. And I ran my first marathon, a year and a half ago at
Oh,
48
that's
and at
amazing. Yeah.
46. Uh, yeah, excited about it. And I'm excited to take a little bit of fuel, just a little bit of energy from you that, in your, 53 to 55 year range. I mean, you're running marathons, you're running triathlons, you're doing these things where once upon a time you felt, man, this half marathon or this half triathlon is
Yeah.
is as far as I want to go. But you kept in the game mentally, and now you're in better shape than ever before. So that's inspirational to me at my season of life. So thank you for that. Where can we go and find out more about you and connect with you, Shawn?
So I created a website, which is basically the landing point for all the things that I'm doing. It's got links to videos that I've created on YouTube. It's got links to audio tracks I've created on Spotify. It's got links to like the motivational speakers that I follow the most. It's got links to products that I use and recommend. And the website is ShawnHoytStayActive.com. So,
Okay.
you know, for those who may not, it's ShawnHoyt. So ShawnHoytStayActive.com. All of my daily updates or regular updates go on Instagram. So I'm at Shawn Hoyt Stay Active. I like to follow as many people as I can who are kind of also on their authentic journey. So if you follow me on Instagram, I will happily follow and cheer you on back. And don't be surprised if all of a sudden I'm commenting on your posts because that's what I do. um,
Awesome.
and I really like to have that back and forth active support, versus just doom scrolling, which is something we can easily
Yeah.
fall into the habit of. when I'm using social media, if I find myself not having commented or interacted on anything within like 30 seconds, I stop myself and say, all right, be mindful, like read this content and interact with it versus just mindlessly consuming it.
Okay.
But those are the two best ways. So through my website, you'll find everything that I'm doing, and then if you want to have a more kind of kind of regular, consistent interaction as to what I'm doing, follow me on Instagram.
Received. Okay, good. Well, let's move into wrap up here. This has been amazing to hear your story, and I found a lot of inspiration from it. I've got 3 questions to wrap things up today in the lightning round, Shawn. And the first question is around books. If you're a reader, is there 1 or up to 3, between 1 and 3 books that have had an impact in your life that you'd recommend?
I read a book last year that I tell a lot of people about because I just loved it. And I think, Matt, I think you have young children, right? So if you haven't read this book, it's a really inspiring book, I think for parents in particular, but for anybody. And it's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And it's really an amazing book about, what's the single most important factor that determines, who succeeds and why. And it's not IQ, it's not socioeconomic background, it's not, the amount of resources that you have in your life or who this has been proven study after study. And she gives a lot of really cool examples, like the West Point entrance exam, for example, of how really it comes down to grit. And grit is your ability to find something that you're passionate about and then really persevere in your pursuit of it. And that grit is what determines, basically, who wins, who loses, who gets the highest grades on tests, who succeeds the most at West Point, study after study after study, it's grit. And I just love this book. And she also talks about how you can inculcate grit in your kids and that grit can be learned. It's not just, some part of it is, I think, heritable, but it also can be learned and taught. And so I just absolutely love that book. That one really jumped out at me. Another book that I'm a huge fan of is called Arete, Arete, by Brian Johnson. And he is a philosopher. He has studied all the great philosophers over the century. He has read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of philosophy books and distilled them all into what he calls philosopher's notes. And he takes all of that knowledge in his head and he brings it into this handbook that basically allows you to figure out how you can use all of these centuries of philosophical knowledge to be your best self. And the thing I love about it is the focus is on every day, not just in general, but what can you do today? And then, and then the next day, what can you do today? And he's got a companion app called Heroic, which I use religiously every day to focus myself on right now. Am I doing the thing I need to do to be best in my energy? Am I doing the thing I need to do to be the best at work? Am I doing the thing I need to do to be the best in my relationships? And I love the focus and intentionality it brings into my life.
That's fantastic. And I love that you shared those because he's been scheduled for the show and he has an amazing wow package that he sends when he's going to guest on the show. So I have a t-shirt, I've got the challenge point, and I love the Arete concept. I was wearing the t-shirt yesterday. I wear the black one, the heroic one to do yard work, and I wear the white one to the gym. So I love the shirts and it's good stuff. About switching gear to music, is there a certain type of music or artist or a song that really inspires you and fills your bucket?
So for me, I read a book called Endure by Alex Hutchinson. I don't know if you're familiar with this book. It's a fascinating summary of all the scientific literature about endurance and what affects human performance. And one of the things that he documents in the book, based on study after study after study, is that what we listen to and the thoughts that we put into our own mind have a really significant impact on our performance. And so, I really try to consume as much positive, inspirational, motivational content as I can. And I've actually curated this into some playlists on Spotify. You can find them on my website. But also, if you just type in Shawn Hoyt, they'll pop up because I've named all the playlists, like, Shawn Hoyt's motivation or Shawn Hoyt's, workout or whatever. But for me, all of those tracks have, there's catchy music and whatever, but the words, the content of all of those is empowering. or it's motivational. And so
Fantastic.
I just listen to this stuff constantly. My Spotify numbers are through the roof in terms of my listening. So I certainly get my money's worth for my subscription, because throughout the day, as I'm
Excellent.
going about my day and or working out or doing whatever, I'm listening to all this content that's reminding me how much power I have as an individual.
Awesome. This is fantastic. This has been really insightful, inspirational for me. And normally I finish by asking about eternal optimism. So we'll finish, and you have the last word here. Shawn, tell me, when I say the word eternal optimist, what might eternal optimist mean to you?
What it means to me is that no matter what situation you're in, no matter how bad it is, you always can see the good in the situation and realize there's something to be grateful for. Always.
Perfect.